Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 42 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. It's November 2nd, 2023. Tonight, Chuck and I will be previewing the Southeastern Conference, another 14-team conference, so it might be a little on the longer side. But as usual, we're going to start with the first in alphabetical order. That is the Alabama Crimson Tide. 31-6 and 16-2 a year ago. They made it to the Sweet 16. Nate Oates is returning for year 5 in Tuscaloosa. They do lose a whole lot of contributors, most notably Brandon Miller, Noah Clowney, Javon Quinterly, Charles Bediako, and then a couple of role players in Jaden Bradley and Namari Burnett. They do bring in a couple really highly ranked players, Grant Nelson from North Dakota State, Aaron Estrada from Hofstra, Latrell Wrightsell from Cal State Fullerton, and then 4 freshmen. They do also return Nick Pringle, Rylan Griffin, Mark Sears. So Chuck, after really being one of the best teams in the country for most of the season last year, how big of a step back do you think Alabama will take this year?
From years past, I definitely think they'll take a, a step back from the Alabama that we've become accustomed to. I do think they're a fringe top 25 team, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them somewhat consistently in the rankings, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall out of the rankings, have a couple bad losses here and there, because they're definitely not, the powerhouse as we're used to seeing with Nate Oates and all the talent that he brings. I really like the two transfers that they brought in, Grant Nelson and Aaron Estrada. Me being a mid-major guy, I love seeing those guys. And I hope they thrive in a high major conference. Me personally, I've seen Aaron Estrada play live a couple of times, being on that opposing sideline, and he's just an unbelievable player. I think his game will translate to the high major level very, very well. I know he was at Oregon before Hofstra, but he's just one of those players that is going to get to his spots, and he's going to score a lot of points. So I think him and Mark Sears are going to complement each other very, very well. I think Mark Sears is obviously he's going to be in for a big year. He should have a decent amount of volume. But I think they're still going to be a good team. They're not going to take the biggest step back or drop off of all time, but you know they're still going to be a fringe top 25 team in my opinion.
Yeah, you've got 3 of their transfers all over 15 points a game at their previous school. Now, I'm not saying they'll do that again, but if you can score it, you can score it. So I think that I don't think they're national championship contenders, and they might not win the SEC, but they should be a good season, maybe get a 4 seed, and should be in the top 4 in the SEC. I've actually got them 4th. I just think that there's a couple better teams in this conference, but by no means do I see making the tournament really a risk for the Crimson Tide. Now, the analytics are a little bit higher on Alabama than I would have thought. 10th in Ken Palm and 19th in Bart Torvik. Now, those aren't the Bible again. They're based on last year's information, but that's certainly a little bit higher than I would have thought. So next team will be the Arkansas Razorbacks. They were 22-14 and 8-10, which was tied for 9th in this conference last year, but they did make it to the Sweet 16. Erica Musselman is back for year 5 in Fayetteville. They do lose 3 double-digit scorers, Ricky Council, Anthony Black, Nick Smith, but they do bring in one of the best transfer hauls of really anyone in the entire country. Khalif Battle from Temple, Tremont Mark from Houston, L. Ellis from Louisville, Jeremiah Davenport from Cincinnati, Chandler Lawson from Memphis, Denny J. Harris from Southern Miss, a couple freshmen, and they return Trayvon Brazil, Makai Mitchell, and Devontae Davis. Arkansas really never reached the potential that they could have last year with all that talent. They should be near the top of this conference again, especially with these high-level transfers they brought in.
Absolutely. Eric Musselman, as John Rothstein, likes to call him the importer, and he does a great job every year. Bringing in talent with that transfer portal, and I think them bringing back Trevon Brazil is going to be huge for them. were on the trajectory to be a Final Four team. I watched them last year a lot, and when he was on the floor, I really thought to myself, who was going to stop this team? And then obviously he had the injury, and that prevented him from playing for the rest of the year, I believe. And they weren't really the same without him, but this team is going to be good. Their transfer class, like, obviously you listed everybody, and I not even going into everybody individually. That's just an unbelievable haul for Eric Musselman, and he's just a great coach. No matter what, he always just seems to, despite how the regular season goes, whenever it gets to tournament time, it seems like he always does a great job when he gets there, especially last year being an 8 seed and beating the defending champions, Kansas. So they're definitely going to be towards that top three, definitely top four of the conference, and they're going to have a really, really strong season.
Yeah, I think you know, their scoring and shooting the ball was their main issue last year. They just did not shoot threes at all. And, you bring in a couple of really high level scorers that, they might not be like knockdown lethal 3-point shooters, but that shouldn't be an issue this year. Analytics, 14th in Ken Pom for Arkansas, 19th offense, 9th defense. And then Bart Torvik, 22nd overall, 35th and 12th. So their defense is certainly going to be elite. And I can't see why their offense shouldn't be there also. And Khalif Battle, 18 points a game at Temple. Tremont Mark, 10 points a game at Houston. Trayvon Brazil honestly would be in the NBA if he didn't get injured. And L. Ellis, 17 and a half at Louisville. So, and Devo Davis, 10.9. Like, I don't see scoring being a big issue for these guys. And Musselman's done it before with a lot less talent. So they're actually my pick to win the conference. I really like them. I think they might be a little bit on the lighter side in terms of depth. They, listed here, they think Ellis will come off the bench, but after that it's, a lot of seniors and graduates and fifth-year guys that haven't really put up the stats yet. But if they've got to be your 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guys, those sorts of players should be able to get the job done. It was real close between the team that I put second in Arkansas, but they just never really got going last year, and they still made the Sweet 16. So I'm going to go with them to win the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Last of the A's here, Chuck, we've got the Auburn Tigers, 21-13, 10-8. A year ago, they were 7th in the SEC. They did make it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Bruce Pearl's 10th season in charge. They do lose their two big guards from last year, Wendell Green and Alan Flanagan. They do bring in a couple transfers. Denver Jones from Florida International, Chaney Johnson from Alabama Huntsville, and Chad Baker Mazzara from Northwestern Florida State. So you get a couple of junior college, a couple of Division II transfers in there. You lose your two guards, but you do bring back the big guy, Janai Broom. So I have to think it's probably going to be more of the same for Auburn this year.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely see them finishing probably middle of the pack. Janai Broom is obviously he might be the best defender in college basketball with his shot blocking ability. He's a very talented player, and I know some people that are close with Trey Donaldson, their guard, and I think he's definitely going to have a big role with the team this year. He's a talented small guard. He's crafty, and I think he's going to do well. To be honest, I don't know a whole lot about this Auburn team. Losing those two guards, especially Wendell Green, it's going to be difficult for them to produce, a lot of wins like we saw 2 years ago. I think the year that they had last year is probably going to be more. I think we're probably going to see that again this year. So.
Yeah, I've got them 8th in the conference. I still think they can make the tournament, but I really can't see more than like a 8 or 9 seed, which is what they were last year. They don't have the Jabari Smiths and Walker Kesslers anymore that made them really the best team in the country for part of that season 2 years ago. But I think if Bruce Pearl can establish this as like the floor for the program, I think they're in really good shape long term. And he's made a Final Four. He's done some great things there at Auburn. Just if you make the tournament again this year, I think you're going to have to call that a success. The next team, we're going to go down south to the Florida Gators. They were 16-17 and 9-9 a year ago in Todd Golden's first season in Gainesville. They do lose the big guy Colin Castleton. They lose Kawasi Reeves, Kyle Lofton, and a couple other role players. But they do bring in a pretty solid transfer class. Walter Clayton Jr. from Iona, Tyrese Samuel from Seton Hall, Micah Hangloten from Marshall, Zion Pullen from UC Riverside, and Julian Rishwain from San Francisco, and also E.J. Jarvis from Yale. So I think Chuck, year one under Todd Golden, a little bit underwhelming. He was a great coach at San Francisco, but the pieces are there for a good year too for the Gators.
Yeah, no, the pieces are definitely there. Um, I really like the additions of Tyrese Samuel and Walter Clayton. I we played EJ Jarvis last year at Yale, and he's obviously very talented as well. And I think they will have a good year for sure. I know I think I looked at their box score with their scrimmage against FIU, and I think Tyrese Samuel played really well from what I can recall. Um, but for Florida fans, um, you know, I've watched Walter Clayton Jr. play multiple times, him being in our conference, and he is an unbelievable athlete. He's an unbelievable player. The sky is the limit for that kid. And you know, he had NBA scouts looking at him at Iona. I think he's definitely one name that Florida Gator fans should be really really excited about. And that just again that might be my personal bias. Seeing him play in person and him being a MAC guy, but if you just watch his raw athleticism combined with his skills, he's going to be a great player, and his game is definitely going to translate into the SEC very very well, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So
of the three MAC guards that left, really the high level ones. We talked about Jenkins with St. John's, and then Mike Kumar and I talked about McCullum with Oklahoma. These three are really good players, regardless of who they're playing against. And Clayton is a big guy. He's like 6'3", and if he's got the physicality at least to be able to hang in any conference, and I don't think the SEC is the most physical conference in the league either. Not that that would really deter him at all, but Florida should make the tournament this year. I think it would be a big disappointment if they don't. I've got them sixth, which should be plenty to get in. They do find themselves a little bit lower on the analytics than probably I would have thought. 39th in Ken Palm and 25th in Bart Torvik. Their defense is supposed to be a lot better than their offense, but you've got guys that have scored it before. Tyrese Samuel, double-digit scorer in the Big East. Zion Pullen, 18 points a game in the Big West for UC Riverside. If you get these guys enough good looks, they're going to score. And obviously Clayton, almost 17 a game at Iona. If these coaches are as good as we think they are, you should be able to get them open shots. So I really like Todd Golden. I think he did awesome at San Francisco in a really, really tough situation out there in the WCC. Brought them into the tournament as an at-large bid, and then obviously got to step up to Florida last year. But if he does do well this year, you can kind of write off last year, and you can say, all right, Florida are here to stay. So the next team here is the Georgia Bulldogs, 16-16, 6-12 last year. That was 11th in the conference. Mike White, second season in Georgia after coming up from Florida. They lose a lot of players. They bring a ton of transfers in. Jalen Deloach, Noah Thomason, R.J. Melendez from Illinois. I don't really know these returning players very much, but is there any way that Georgia doesn't finish near the bottom this year?
man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for them to win games. That's for sure. I know they bring in the D2 Player of the Year, I'm pretty sure, and that Nova Southeastern team, they're very talented. We'll see how his game transfers or translates over to high major basketball. RJ Melendez, I think he can be a solid piece. Again, another Matt guard, Noah Thomason, who I'm very familiar with. He's talented. He's another one of those guards that can really get to his spots and score the basketball. I think what he did in the MAC, he really got to that left hand a lot. Driving the ball into the paint, a lot of lefty floaters. He could shoot a little bit too. I'm not sure with his athleticism. I'm not sure he's the most athletic guy. I'm not sure how he's going to fare. Um, in an SEC program against all this talent. Again, like you said before, if you could score the basketball, and he scored a lot last year. I think he might have given us 25 plus in both games that we played him. So there's no doubt about it that he's talented and he can score the basketball. Um, but I'm curious to see how he does in the SEC. I think he can be a good player. That's for sure. But we'll see. And the rest of the roster, I don't know a whole ton about. So to be honest, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a great year for Mike White. Maybe they could scrape across some wins and maybe shock some people with what they got. But it's not looking great, especially with how deep the conference is. It feels like this year.
Yeah, I've got them 12th, and it just doesn't seem like they got enough talent to win even half the games. And talent has not been an issue at Georgia in the years past. Nick Claxton in the NBA, Anthony Edwards in the NBA, and those teams weren't even good. I know, obviously, different coach. Tom Crean was the coach then, but yeah, I think it's going to take another year or two to get things off the ground in Athens. So 12 out of 14 for me. It's not really a compliment. I just think they're better than two teams. But next team, Kentucky Wildcats, 22-12 and 12-6 last year. That was third in the conference. They did make it to the round of 32, where they lost to Kansas State. John Calipari is back for year 15. They do lose a ton of talent from last year. Oscar Sheboy, Jacob Toppin, Cason Wallace, Severe Wheeler, Chris Livingston, and C.J. Frederick. And they do bring in, a ton of freshmen. Calipari is going back to what kind of made them so successful over the years. They do get Trey Mitchell from West Virginia, who I believe he never actually played for West Virginia. I think this is his fourth school. It's at UMass and then Texas. He's a decent player, but they're going to basically live and die with their freshmen, Justin Edwards, Robert Dillingham, DJ Wagner, Aaron Bradshaw. They do bring back Antonio Reeves, too, who can shoot it like really nobody else. But in a conference that is just really old, Kentucky has a lot of youngsters in there. And I guess that's what made them successful over the years. But how do you think that'll fare for Calipari and co. this year?
We're definitely going to find out what John Calipari is made of. I think they've been disappointing the past few years, and I think disappointing is somewhat of an understatement with what Kentucky used to be. Um, you know, I know they have the talent. The freshman class that they brought in is unbelievable. They're loaded. But every single year, it depends how well can these guys play with each other. How are these guys going to accept their roles? I think that's what made that 2014-15 team just so special was all those guys accepted their roles and they all knew what the bigger picture was and the common goal was. I think, today in this day and age, everybody kind of wants the spotlight. Everybody kind of wants a bigger role. So we'll see how those guys, especially, DJ Wagner being, the number one rated recruit for so much of his life, Justin Edwards being such a highly rated recruit his entire life, Rob Dillingham, obviously, all these guys, will, being such highly rated recruits and being the guy, we'll see how well they'll be able to play and accept their their role when they kind of have to take a step back. I think, adding Trey Mitchell, I think that's a good, a veteran guy. He's been around a few different programs now. He knows kind of, the landscape of college basketball. So maybe he can be a good mentor for some of those guys. And obviously bringing back Antonio Reeves is huge for that team. So, I think they can, and they probably will finish, top four, top five. I think they're still going to have a successful year. Even if they can't really get it fully going as we had been used to seeing, those Kentucky teams pre-COVID. But we'll see what John Calipari's really made of this year. I feel like we've been saying that the past couple of years. But we'll see. Maybe if they don't have a great year, what's going to happen to Calipari. So that might be something to definitely look out for this year. So
Yeah, they're definitely the biggest question mark in this league, and you know I lean towards giving them the benefit of the doubt because this is how he's won before. John Calipari has won games in his Kentucky career by making sure that his team had more talent than the other team. You can criticize his in-game coaching a lot because honestly, he's probably just an okay X's and O's guy, but he's an elite recruiter. Doesn't get much better than this. So I have them fifth in the conference. I do think they'll be in that 20 to 25, 15 to 25 range this year. They'll probably lose a couple games that they shouldn't because they're all 17 and 18 and 19 years old, but they've really got enough talent to beat anybody. And last year they didn't score it either. The SEC was a horrible shooting conference last year. Nobody could make threes, and they didn't. And then they kind of bought into playing defense and playing really hard, and that's why they, won at Tennessee and won a couple of those big games. But the disappointments over the last couple of years haven't been, lack of a good team. They've had good teams. They just haven't really done as well as they probably should have. So, Calipari's name always gets thrown around in the offseason. We'll talk about that at the end, but they're going to get tested pretty early this year. They got Kansas in the Champions Classic on the 14th. They have a Miami-Florida team at home that's pretty good. They have a North Carolina team at the CBS Sports Classic. And then, they played Louisville on the road too, but that shouldn't be too much of an issue. So, I happen to think that it'll be more of the same for Kentucky, but might take them a little bit of time to figure it out because none of these guys have ever played together. So the next team we're going to go is the Louisiana State Tigers. Matt McMahon is in the second year in charge. Last year they were 14 and 19 and 2 and 16, dead last in the conference. They do lose Justice Hill, KJ Williams, Adam Miller. They do bring in Jalen Cook from Tulane, Will Baker from Nevada, Jordan Wright from Vandy, Damian Collins from Kentucky, Hunter Dean from George Washington. They do bring back Trey Hannibal, but Chuck, I happen to think that this team is going to be set for another bad year.
yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that one. I don't know how it could get worse than last year. 2-16 the SEC is pretty bad. Hopefully it's not as bad for Matt McMahon this year again. I think bringing in Jalen Cook, he's obviously a great guard, can score the basketball, you know whenever he wants. But they definitely brought in a couple other solid transfers. Will Baker from Nevada, he's solid. Damian Collins from Kentucky, obviously he's a good player, knows the conference well. But I don't know if those guys are pieces that are going to win you games in the SEC, especially as mentioned before, such a loaded SEC conference this year.
They've got a lot of veterans, I guess, is their only real positive. A lot of juniors and seniors, but they've got a pretty good Dayton team away to Syracuse, Kansas State, Texas, and the non-conference. They've got a lot of tough games. Now, the positive is if they win those games, they don't need to go crazy in the SEC to make the tournament. But I happen to think that they're rooted for the bottom again. I've got them in 14th. Coach McMahon did great things at Murray State, brought a lot of those players over, and they just really hit a wall last year in the middle of the year where they were really not even competitive against some teams that they should have been. But we'll see how things go. But I'm not going to be on the optimistic side for LSU. Next team, one of the teams with probably the most to talk about, the Ole Miss Runnin' Rebs, 12-21, 3-15 last year, a spot above LSU. They do bring in Chris Beard for his first season in charge, for getting fired for domestic assault allegations. Just less than 12 months later, he's got himself another Power 5 job. So, interesting situation there. He loses a ton of players. He brings in Brandon Murray from Georgetown, Alan Flanagan from Auburn, Jalen Murray from St. Peter's, Jamarion Sharp from Western Kentucky. He's 7'5", and Musa Cisse from Oklahoma State. So, you have some talented players in there, and Chris Beard as a coach is really good. Where do you think the expectations for Ole Miss should be in year one for Coach Beard?
It's hard to say because if I were an Ole Miss fan, I wouldn't want to get my hopes up too high. But this team has the potential to win a lot of games in the SEC, in my opinion. You know, that center spot with Musa Cisse and Jamarian Sharp, that could be probably, you know, a very dangerous duo.
Now, you're not going to get layups against them.
No, you are not. You know, you think you're Musa Cisse is coming off the court, you think you're okay, and then they bring in a dude that's 7'5", that's pretty pretty unbelievable and not seen a lot in college basketball. Alan Flanagan, I like him, didn't love him at Auburn. I still think he's a talented player. He should be a good piece to that team. And somehow again we were talking about another Matt guard. I didn't even realize how many guys transferred high major from from our conference, but Jalen Murray, I'll talk a little bit more extensively on him since I've seen him play 4, 5, 6 times in person, and he is just a dog. He can score the basketball. He's small. He's 5'10". He might be shorter than me, but the kid is just an unbelievable warrior. Um, you know, Even with that St. Peter's team that struggled last year, he still got them to the MAC semifinals, and it's because he willed them to wins. He was, like I said, a warrior. He's a competitor. He can walk you down, pull up threes in your face, score the basketball however he wants. He will bully you even though he's only 5'10". I'm a little concerned about his size in the SEC and with high major basketball, but I don't know. I think Shaheen Holloway just really instilled something in him, and I think that's why he went to St. Peter's originally, was because he is a dog. He's from New York City. People know him, people love him. Juju Murray, he's an unbelievable player, and he's just an unbelievable competitor. So, he's always been one of my favorite players to watch in the league, and I think Ole Miss fans are gonna fall in love with him real fast.
Yeah, he was a pretty significant piece of the St. Peter's team that went to the Elite Eight. Now, Banks and Lee were the starters, but he came off the bench and made a couple big threes against Kentucky, who is in the SEC. So they're not going to be too happy to see him again. I've got Ole Miss 10th. I just think they miss out, but they've got the talent to make the tournament. And, it might not be the end of the world if they don't make the tournament. New coach first year, and, their football team's doing pretty well. But I think circumstances may have just lined up for them to get a coach who probably would have never gone near Ole Miss. He was on the ascendancy to get maybe any job he wanted, but circumstances are a part of the game, and they may have just lucked out. The next team is their in-state rivals, the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Year 2 for Chris Jans in Mississippi. Last year they lost in the first 4 after being 21-13. And 8-10, they lose very little. Nobody who scored over 4 points a game from last year. They do bring in Andrew Taylor from Marshall and a couple of junior college and Division II transfers. They do bring back their big guy Tolu Smith, who is one of the best players in the conference, but he is injured and most likely will not return until conference play. So Chris Jans, year 1 was very good. You lose your big guy. I think you would probably take another year where you make the NCAA tournament.
100%. Mississippi State, they're one of those teams that that I really like because they defend really well, they rebound the ball really well. But missing Tolu Smith now it's gonna hurt them. And that was kind of their identity last year. As especially, you saw in that first four game, you know, against Pitt. They had some trouble scoring the ball. But they can defend, and that's no question about that. I think Chris Jans is a good coach. He's definitely going to lead them to a lot of victories. Maybe not a lot, but he's definitely going to give them some good wins. It might not be in the prettiest style, but um, yeah, I mean, it's just I think this year is just really going to depend on when Tolu Smith comes back and how he's able to perform after injury. Obviously, you're bringing back Shaquille Moore, DJ Jeffries, and they're very talented players who can score the basketball. But we'll see how they do without their big man because he's really the heart and soul of their team, in my opinion. So
Yeah, they have a great defense, and I think the SEC's defenses may have been a little overrated because of how bad the other shooters were. And, not being able to shoot it kind of fed right into Mississippi State's game. So I think if teams can shoot it a little bit, and obviously, Tolu Smith may have been a candidate for SEC Player of the Year. Now, you're only supposed to gauge the conference games for that award, but if he's not, sharp right away, he probably doesn't get that. But he is one of the best players in the conference, and if they get him back for most of the SEC season, I think they should make the tournament. I've got him seventh. I did knock him down one spot after, the news isn't really new, but I would have had him a little higher if he played the entire year. But they do have a very weak non-conference schedule. They play Georgia Tech on the road, Washington State on a neutral, Arizona State on a neutral, Rutgers on a neutral, but no surefire tournament teams, and I think that could come back to bite them. So you gotta probably win them all. They're favored in every game, and if you go undefeated, and then you can get your strength schedule up by playing SEC teams, but you can't drop maybe more than one of those games to have a chance. But Chris Jans is a really good coach, but they were dead last in 3-point shooting last year. And the only reason I knew that was because Fairfield was second to last. But I remember I kept flopping between the two teams. But yeah, I there were so many of these coaches who were first-year coaches in the SEC last year. And I think Jans was probably did the best out of any of them. So I think that they will take another tournament appearance, and I think they'll get it. So next team is the Missouri Tigers. Dennis Gates back for another year. His second year also 25-10, 11-7 last year. They made it to the round of 32. They lose almost all of their major contributors from last year. Kobe Brown, Demoy Hodge, DeAndre Golston, Isaiah Mosley, all 9 points or above. They do bring in a couple transfers. Tamar Bates from Indiana, Caleb Grill from Iowa State, Connor Vanover from Oral Roberts. I have to think there's a little bit of a step back coming from Missouri, but how do they make sure that that's not worse than maybe middle of the pack?
it's going to be tough, for sure. But I would say not a lot of people expected Missouri to do what they did last year. So I think they got a great coach in Dennis Gates. He obviously knows what he's doing. If he could kind of lead this team like he did with the team last year. I know obviously a bunch of transfers from Cleveland State. Um, I think they could position themselves, well again. Maybe hopefully sneak into maybe a first four game or even maybe exceed those expectations again and be a seven seed or wherever they may end up. But we're gonna find out. Connor Vanover makes his return to the SEC. Granted, it's not like he played a whole ton at Arkansas, but we'll see how he can do coming back to the conference. But yeah, I'm not really sure where I'm at with this team yet. It'll be interesting for sure. But yeah, I'll say I trust in Dennis Gates and what he does because he's a proven winner and he wins. He's won in all of his head coaching jobs so far. So
Yeah, last year they really didn't play defense, and
yeah,
especially as much as the other teams. I mean, they were fine, but they weren't very good at defense. They just hit a lot of threes. They played really small, and I think that if you get a little better defensively, like you'll still hit threes this year. Caleb Grill is a good shooter. Tamar Bates is a good shooter. Nick Honor, they're good shooters. So, and then if you got a 7'5" guy blocking shots in the paint, I think there is a path to at least playing a little better than in some aspects as last year. But they could really score it. So, Gates probably gonna have to work a little harder to get his guys open shots because Kobe Brown and Hodge, I mean, you could just give them the ball and get out of the way.
Mhm.
And that's why they won some games. And, they hit a buzzer beater to win on the road at Tennessee. That was a little lucky from half court, but, that stuff happens in this league. I've got them ninth. I do think it's possible for them to make the tournament, but, I do think it might take some time for the Tigers to get going. They play Memphis and Kansas and Illinois actually in the non-conference. So they got three really good opportunities. They've also got Minnesota on the road and Pittsburgh on the road and Seton Hall on a neutral. So, you've got your opportunities there. None of those teams should be terrible, but a lot of high major ball is there's not much better preparation for the SEC now. They might lose a lot of games, and that might take them out of contention, barring a real good SEC season, but if you win them, you're going to be in good shape. So the next team, we've got the South Carolina Gamecocks. Lamont Paris in year two in Columbia, they were 11-21 and 4-14 last year. They lose G.G. Jackson, Hayden Brown, Chico Carter. They do bring in Talon Cooper from Minnesota, B.J. Mack from Wofford, Stephen Clark from the Citadel, and Miles Stute from Vanderbilt. They have Michi Johnson, who was from Ohio State a couple years ago. They brought in a couple scorers, but might be tough in year two for Lamont Paris.
yeah, it's going to be a tough year for South Carolina. Um, I don't. I would be lying if I said I knew a whole lot about this team. Um, you know, I obviously I know a few names on that roster and some of the transfers that they brought in, but all I'm gonna say, I'm gonna keep it short and sweet. It's gonna be tough down there in Columbia, South Carolina, and it might be a long year for them. But hopefully, I don't like seeing teams lose. Obviously, working in the business and you know you want to see all your guys succeed and win some games, but it's unfortunately that's not the nature of this business, and there's going to be some losers, and I think South Carolina unfortunately is going to be one of those losers this year. So
Yeah, it may have been the Power 5 team that I watched the least of last year. Now, they did win at Rupp Arena against Kentucky, but that was no more than a fluke, unfortunately. I mean, they hit a lot of threes, and Paris did a great job at Chattanooga, I think. But it's going to be more of the same like Georgia. I've got them 13th in the conference, and I don't really see a way. But even if they get into the 8th or ninth range, anywhere near 500, I think you got to call it a pretty successful season. Talon Cooper's an interesting player from the Big Ten. He's a real big point guard, but does not shoot it, and he's really bad from the free throw line. So, that's another thing to note. Not Michi Johnson has a flair for the dramatic. He's hit a couple game winners, but not really consistent. But you have a couple players who score at other places, so maybe you play really hard on the defensive end and let some guys shoot it. But they're in the hundreds in the analytics, and you're gonna have to say a lot is gonna have to go right for them to be anywhere near the middle of the pack. So the next team is the Tennessee Volunteers, 25-11, 11-7 last year. They tied for fourth, made it to the Sweet 16. Rick Barnes is back for year 9 in Knoxville. They do lose a lot of players, and was off to Michigan. Julian Phillips, Tyreek Key, and Uros Plavsic are all gone. They do bring in Dalton Knecht from Northern Colorado and Justin Gainey from South Carolina Upstate. A couple freshmen also. You bring back Ziegler, you bring back Vescovy, Jordan James. I do. Tennessee was super deep last year, and while that might not be the case again this year, they've certainly got the talent to be near the top of the conference. As you know, they did just beat Michigan State on the road in a scrimmage without their two guards. So, what's the limit for Tennessee this year?
Man, this team can win the conference. That's the sky is the limit for this team this year. You know, I think, in SEC play, though, they obviously they have the talent to win the conference. Having Zakai Ziegler back this year was huge. Losing him that late in the year is just, it's crushing. And obviously they made it to the Sweet 16, and that was huge that they beat Duke. Without their leader and
And
without their point
nobody gave
guard,
them a chance in that game.
nobody. And you know, a lot of credit to those players for stepping up and winning that game. I saw a couple of the scrimmage highlights and Dalton Connect. He had a highlight reel dunk, and if he can be doing that on a consistent basis, then you know there might be good things coming for Tennessee, and hopefully that's going to be kind of you know the that highlight is going to be what the Tennessee season is going to look like this year. Once we get to the tournament, we'll see. I know Rick Barnes in the Sweet 16, they don't really go well together, but you know, hopefully this team, can make it out of the Sweet 16, if they make it there, and they have unlimited potential this year, in my opinion. They're a really great team. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've got them second. I think them and Arkansas are the two national championship contenders from this conference. A lot has to go right for the other teams, but I don't think a lot has to go right for Tennessee this year. You've got some big guys who can play. You've got two guards who are as seasoned and as good as really any two in the country. Connect averaged 20 points a game at Northern Colorado last year and almost 40% from three. And that was on high volume, too. So that's not open. That's not, he was a transfer that was real close to going to Indiana, and a lot of teams were calling for him. And, Northern Colorado's not a school that would typically get that much attention, but I think he's going to fit right in the SEC. He's big, too. He's 6'6", but I don't know if they could really play their total, all out, all the time game, where if you have 12 players, you can kind of press and jump the passing lanes and play every minute 150%. But I think that might be a little better for them because, at times they looked a little slow and out of energy offensively, and it's because they were going, all in defensively. But it was a scrimmage, but that crowd at Michigan State was as good as it gets in the season, and they went there and won. Now they almost, they had a huge lead early and almost gave it up. But if your senior guards are in there, you're not coming back on this Tennessee team. They're too good defensively, and you had some real good 3-point shooters. That is a good formula to win games for Rick Barnes, and just going to come down to what happens in the tournament. So the Texas A&M Aggies are next. Buzz Williams back for year 5 in College Station, 25-10 and 15-3 last year. They did lose to Penn State in the round of 64. They lose Dexter Dennis, and they bring in Jace Carter from Illinois Chicago and Eli Lawrence from Middle Tennessee State. They return pretty much their entire starting lineup. Wade Taylor, Tyrese Radford, Henry Coleman, Julius Marble are all back. People are really optimistic about Buzz and the Aggies this year, and pretty good reason why.
Yeah, this is a team last year that I picked, I think, to go to my Final Four in my bracket. I love this team. I love Wade Taylor. I think he's an unbelievable player, and I think he has the potential to win Player of the Year. I might have been, a little in over my head thinking that they would go to a Final Four. But I think they got a great team. They got a great backcourt. I love Buzz Williams as a coach. I think he's a great leader of men. I think he's a great guy to have at the forefront of your program. Obviously Tyrese Radford, I think, he's obviously very talented. Julius Marble as, your five man. That's a great guy to have. Just a big physical guy, and I love this Texas A&M team. I'm not saying that they're going to win the conference, but you know they have the potential to have an unbelievable year. They have the guards to make it deep in March, in my opinion. And if a lot of people say guards win you games in March, and these two guys, Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford, they're two very, very, very talented guards, and individuals, and I think Texas A&M can have a really spectacular year, and something special could really happen down in Texas.
Yeah, it took Buzz a couple years to get things going down there, but I mean, a lot of people are picking them to win the conference. I've got them third, but they should be in the top 25 for most of the year. They have a crazy non-conference schedule at Ohio State, at SMU. They play an Oral Roberts team that's been good over the years. Penn State on a neutral, at Virginia, home to DePaul, home to Memphis, and Houston on a neutral. Man, that is a good month of non-conference ball where you're playing teams that are in the top 100 or better. And they start off with Texas A&M Commerce, and they have Houston Christian and Prairie View A&M at the end. But I don't know if there's another team with this many power conference opponents in the non-conference slate. And Houston neutral and at Virginia, those will be really tough games. But with how many returners they have, I think they'll be as ready as any team for those games. So they don't have a super tough SEC schedule, or at least what we think. But there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic this year. And Texas A&M, I think Final Four might be a little much, but second weekend is definitely a possibility for the Aggies this year in the tournament. So we're going to go to the last team here. That is the Vanderbilt Commodores. Last year they made the NIT, 22-15 and 11-7. Jerry Stackhouse is back for year 5 in Nashville. They do lose Liam Robbins, Jordan Wright. They do bring in Evan Taylor from Lehigh, Tassos Kamateros from South Dakota, and Van Allen Lubin from Notre Dame. You have Tyron Lawrence returning, who's a good player, but there's a lot of question marks on this team. A couple freshmen coming in. Depth is going to be an issue here. Defense might be an issue. There's a lot of question marks for the Commodores going into this season.
Yeah, Jerry Stackhouse, he hasn't done a spectacular job at Vanderbilt. And granted, it with the academics and all that, it's hard to recruit there, being an SEC school. They from when I was growing up, I remember Vanderbilt having great basketball, and there were a lot of great players that came through that program. But it's kind of a shame that they've disappeared. And they haven't had that in a while. Obviously, Scottie Pippen Jr. was with them, and he was a really fun player to watch. Tyron Lawrence, he's a great player. He's another fun player to watch, but it's just, I just don't think it's really going to be in the cards again for them again. Down in Nashville, and I think it might be a tough year for Jerry Stackhouse. And they made the NIT last year. They won a couple games. So that's huge for the program, but I don't see them doing that again this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that may have been the peak of their. It's really hard to make the tournament there. They've got a super unique stadium with the stadiums behind the benches behind the baskets, but I happen to think that it doesn't get better than that for Vanderbilt. I have them 11th in the conference this year. I do think they will be better than Georgia, LSU, and South Carolina. They should win 5 or 6 games in the SEC, but they've got a over 100th ranked defense and offensively only 52. If you're in the hundreds defensively, you've got to be a top 10 offense to even come close to the tournament. They don't have a ton of tough games in the non-conference. They have North Carolina State on a neutral. They host Boston College, Texas Tech, Memphis. No great teams in there. A couple really solid ones, but I happen to think that this might be Jerry Stackhouse's last year. We'll talk about that later, but I don't see things going well for Vanderbilt. So, after we've gone through the teams like we've done picks for Coach of the Year, Player of the Year. Then I round out my first team, and then we do if how many coaches will be fired. So, first, Chuck, my pick for Coach of the Year is Todd Golden from Florida. I think that they're going to make a big step up, and we talked about it already, but I think he will be recognized for that award this year. Who have you got?
I could see Nate Oates winning it this year. His team obviously they're expected to win basketball games, but they're not expected to win as many as they usually are. But I can see Nate Oates kind of leading his guys and maybe making it to the top three of the conference, top two of the conference potentially. Obviously we'll see how that gets rolling, but kind of maybe a unique pick. I think that would be my pick for Coach of the Year potentially. So
there isn't many people in the country that have done a better job at their current job than Nate Oates has. Coming from Buffalo, that's a major culture difference. Major everything difference. He's coaching at a football school, and as a basketball team, they've been as good as the football team has been recently, and that is really hard to do. So I like that pick. He's probably been the best coach in the conference the last 3 years. I actually thought about him too, but I went with Golden. So now my Player of the Year is a little bit of a shocker, but I'm going with Devontae Davis from Arkansas. I think he is, when he's on, he's one of the best players in the country. Now, he did have 4 points in their game against Purdue, but I think if he can just get a little more consistent, he is, the one who can really make Arkansas go, to the elite level this year.
I think I mentioned it before. With the potential winning Player of the Year, I think I might go Wade Taylor. I love that. I love that Texas A&M team, like I said, and I just love Wade Taylor as a player. I think he could do a lot of damage in the SEC, and if he could help Texas A&M to that top two spot, and potentially even maybe win the conference, then we'll see. Maybe he can pull out Player of the Year, but he's a very talented guard, like I said before, and if he does his thing this year, you never know what can happen. So
yeah, so he's my second name on the first team. He's going to be the best player on a really good team, maybe the best team. So that's certainly more than a possibility. The rest of my first team here, I've got Vescovi from Tennessee, Janai Broome from Auburn, and Brazil from Arkansas. Now, no Kentucky player on there, I know, but you really don't know anything about these freshmen. You'll see a lot of these freshmen really in any conference sprinkled around the second team, and if they have a third or an honorable mention, but it's really hard to give them a first team all conference, especially before they've even scored a point in college. But that's the rest of my first team. If you want to add anything on those players, I think we talked about all of them already, but there was a pretty solid 3 for me. Broome, Taylor, and Davis, I think, are the best players, and then Brazil and Vescovi. The only reason that they won't be there is they may suffer from being just on really good teams, and at some points it is hard for these players who are on really good teams to get these awards, just because they don't have to do it every single day. So the last thing that we do in these conference previews is we predict if any coaches are going to be fired. You look at it, a lot of new coaches in this conference over first, second, even third year guys. To be fired after 1 or 2 years, things have to go really poorly or, something off the court. But I previewed it before. I think Jerry Stackhouse will not be the coach at Vanderbilt next year. He may get an NBA job or another job. But there's only one other one that I could really think them moving on from, and that's Kentucky.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those would be my two as well. You look at every team and every coach. I can't see any of these schools, moving on from the coaches with the current state of their programs. I do think this definitely will be Jerry Stackhouse's year to leave. Like you said, whether he does get an NBA job or, he moves elsewhere. And Cal Perry is it's just so up in the air because it's like, how can you fire John Calipari? He's just such an unbelievable coach, unbelievable, mainly unbelievable recruiter. But at the same time, when you're not producing to Kentucky levels, and if the fans are getting restless, and maybe certain boosters are getting restless, then you know it anything can happen, and it might be time to go for Calipari. But this year we're like I said, we're really going to see, what he's made of, because the past couple of years, I feel like we've been saying that, but, it hasn't really felt like a make or break year for him. But for some reason, this year kind of feels different in a way. So
I think. How bad do you think it needs to get for Kentucky to actually pull the trigger on a move? I would think it has to be, they have to miss the tournament
yeah,
because, even these last couple of years, they were a 2 seed when they lost to St. Peter's, and they were a 6 seed last year, and they won a game. So, obviously the year before they did miss the tournament in the COVID season, I believe, or there may be one in between there, but no. But I think they have to miss the tournament, and they really have to take, a look in the mirror. It's your soul-searching time. Do you really want to do this? Grass isn't always greener. You can call pretty much anybody, but that would be probably the biggest news of sports if he were to get fired. Because a couple of years ago, they gave him a lifetime contract when UCLA, allegedly a lifetime contract, when UCLA was sniffing around when they ultimately hired Mick Cronin. But you go to the bottom of the conference, and it's a second year for Matt McMahon, a second year for Lamont Paris, second year for Mike White, and then you're getting into the middle of the conference, and those teams are going to make the tournament. So, you really should give a coach at least 3 years. I know in the age of the transfer portal, you can get a little bit less patient, but I think it's Vanderbilt and then maybe Kentucky and nobody else. But we're just eclipsing the hour mark here, so pretty good timing. That's all we have for you today. Thanks for tuning in to our SEC preview. Kumar and I will be on tomorrow to preview the ACC. And then over the weekend, Sunday, Joe Mead and I will do a Big Ten football recap. And then Monday, it's time for college hoops. So the schedule will probably be different from week to week over the season, but we'll be sure to keep you posted. So thank you.